All right, Phil, how's it going?
Good. How's it going, Cars?
It's going good.
I feel
Yeah.
like as soon as we hit the record button, I feel a little rigid. There's like
Uh,
a jump start in the back of my head that says, "Just say hello." His name's Carson.
that's funny. Um, okay, so we have talked many times about many different things, and every once in a while we talk about the idea of talking about veganism, and we always push it off. And so here we are. We're going to talk about veganism. And to start it off, I kind of want you just to share your thoughts on veganism.
Oh, okay. So my thoughts on veganism are mainly I just noticed the discourse, and the discourse is like everyone complaining about vegans. Aren't vegans so annoying? And they think they're so great, and I don't notice vegans most of the time being annoying. Occasionally I do, and I'm like, oh, you're an example of one of those annoying vegans people talk about. But the vast majority of the time, um, it's like almost like people who have a guilty conscience don't want to stop. Like they can't stop themselves from just spewing out criticisms of veganism. And what they see is like inciting their anger toward vegans is just the existence of vegans and a willingness for vegans to occasionally say that they're vegan, right? Unprompted or want to have a discussion about their ethics, which is
Mhm.
totally reasonable. Like with that's Christians will say, I'm Christian. Do you want to talk about why I'm Christian? Or an objectivist, a follower of Ayn Rand, will say, hey, I'm an objectivist. Is anyone interested in talking about objectivism? Right.
Mhm.
And some people seem to have such a guilty conscience about it that they fly into a rage and feel like they're being oppressed by someone else's existence, you know.
Mhm.
So that might not be what you're asking, though. Like, what do I think
Mhm.
the core ethics are about veganism? I think vegans, for the most part, have a really good point, both about health, although I might make some exceptions, like fish, I think is pretty good for you and things like that. And you mentioned eggs there might be some bad studies concerning eggs. I'm interested in that because I eat a lot of eggs.
Mhm.
But also just that they're let me go. Well, before I keep ranting, do you want to comment on any of that?
There's a lot of different ways I can take a lot of that, but I do want you to keep ranting actually, and then I'm going to touch on a couple things. So,
Okay, one of previously I remember you felt that the best argument in favor of veganism, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you had a short about this here on YouTube, a short clip, and that was someone making the argument that if it's so natural for us to eat meat, then why don't we have predators' teeth? Do you remember that short?
there was a short that I posted of somebody else talking about how our teeth are kind of designed like maybe chimps, and so our teeth are aligned with them who are like 99% plant eater.
Eaters, yeah. And so I think that, for example, to me, that doesn't necessarily ring true as a good argument. And I would say
Yeah.
because I don't think there's a theory, or at least not a prominent one, that human beings are a predator, like the big, charismatic megafauna we would think of, like lions and tigers and bears, that would actually like physically overpower their prey and eat them. And humans have
Mhm.
never been that kind of omnivore, like a bear omnivore that can do that.
Mhm.
Um, it's more that humans are tool makers, which will use hand axes, which is just a stone that's sharpened, to break open bones and eat marrow, or to break a mollusk and eat a mollusk, or to collect insects and eat those. Some of the earliest signs of husbandry around um, prehistoric sites have been giant snails, actually. And that seems like
Mhm.
a good way to, like, if you do have food that you want to preserve, you can preserve it by feeding it to a living animal that then is not going to rot, and you can come back and eat that snail, that giant snail later. Things like that.
Mhm.
I think that that's where our ancestral meat eating comes from.
Gotcha. Yeah, well, and I think I might have, when I shared that video, I might have talked about how great of an argument it is. Um, it's not really my go-to because, like, for me, it's more of a ethical standpoint. But I do think it's interesting to look at nature and to look at how all this stuff works. Because the guy in that video said the thing about the teeth, but he also talked about how um, only herbivores sweat through sweat glands, and I think like so horses do that, and there's a couple different animals that sweat like that, and so it's just showing these different things. I don't think it necessarily means anything for what we are or even what we should do, because for example, there's a lot of foods that if you just naturally ate how they grew, they would be bad for you, where if you cook them they're good for you. Something like beans can be essentially poisonous if you just eat them raw, but if you
Mm.
cook them they can be really good for you. And
Mm.
same thing with like potatoes and various different things. And so appealing to nature isn't necessarily the best. We can still figure out what's best for us by doing studies after we consume things. I guess I just think it's interesting to look at various things, like the fact that all omnivores and carnivores that eat animals, they chew
Mhm.
into their raw flesh, and and they like when they're hungry and they see animals, they have this desire. They feel like, oh, I want to chew through that body. I want to kill that and chew through it. Where I don't know if
Yeah.
it would be different if we were at a starving level. I know I would eat animals at a starving level, but I don't know if I would ever look at it and like salivate at the idea that I'm seeing this thing. I just go, oh, that's what's going to keep me alive. So I guess I have to do it. And if I can cook it, that's better because, um, but what do you think? Do you think the reason we'd be grossed out at seeing raw flesh is because we're so pampered by being able to see a not gross version, or do you think there's any case where raw flesh would look amazing to us?
I want I want to touch on 2 points. One, that direct question you asked me, and the first one is just that I do think it's a very bad argument that meat eaters make, who will often say, well, that's just the circle of life. That's they we could dig into the naturalistic fallacy they're making a little bit more, as long as they understand they're doing that. If they simply value what's natural in a different way, that's fine, but they should be made aware of it. So I think generally the meat eaters making the circle of life argument is probably not a great argument on their part.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
Um, with your question, that is actually something I've never come across. Because I was picturing my father-in-law coming home with fish the other day, and I was amazed by the fact that they had not been in water for hours. They were just in a pail with snow stuffed on them. And
Mm.
if I took the snow off, the fish was in there like this, still trying to get away. And that was amazing. So this isn't the case of like putting salt on a muscle to make it spasm and the fish is already dead. This is a
Mm.
fish that hasn't been gutted at all, and it's like flopping around trying to get away hours after it's been caught. It's amazing. Um, I didn't know it was like that. I'm not much of a fisherman. But anyway, my point
Mm-hmm.
is, seeing a living animal like that doesn't make me salivate in the way it would if it's been prepared in a way that I'm now accustomed to. Now,
Mm-hmm.
I think that makes a point that's good, that we are not the type of animal that we discussed previously. We're
Mm-hmm.
not the type of omnivore like a bear that sees an animal and salivates about it, because that's never ever been the way that we get our food. If I
Mm-hmm.
see clams and the clams are cracked open and I see the raw flesh of the clam, I salivate. Like a lot of people hate clams, but for those of us who like clams, it's like, yeah, I want that. I eat it,
Mm-hmm.
and that's delicious. Um, and I think that's the kind of salivation we would expect, is the ancestral meat eating that we did experience. Again, bone marrow and and clams and oysters and all kinds of things that mainly are accessed through our tool making.
Mm, gotcha. Yeah, for sure. Okay, so let's branch it off to, I'm kind of curious, what do you feel like humans should do as far as eating when it comes to the ethical side, and how different is that from how you eat?
Um, what should humans do? Um, I guess I don't have really strong opinions about it, other than my main concern is not so much for the well-being of animals as it is for the health of people.
Mm,
So I'm not someone who's super concerned about people's freedom to be able to enjoy the big sugary big gulp in New York City that they tried to ban, or like a triple decker cheeseburger. For
mhm,
me, it's more like, we have a whole society filled with people who have impulse control, and it's best to have sugar taxes and trans fat taxes and try to tax these things into obscurity. Because
mm.
outright bans generally create more problems than they're worth, but taxing things will reduce consumption.
Okay.
And that's
Well,
the
hold
way
on. Let me pause you real quick. I like all that, and I mostly agree with all that. I'm curious though, just like from your personal opinion, ethically, not what should be banned or not, but if you like, we're just gonna have a heart to heart with a few dozen people that you know, and you were gonna tell them like they didn't want necessarily to have to feel like they need to do what you're going to say, but these are just people that have interest in opinions of ethics. What would you say? Because I know like when I thought it was wrong to eat animals before I went vegan and in between going vegan, I still had cases where I ate animals. And so I would have this ethical position and not follow it. So, knowing that you're not vegan, but maybe you feel different ways on the ethical side of it, I'm just curious how you would describe that if you were to achieve, if you were able to or wanting to, what would it look like?
um, Okay, yeah, I see how you're not trying to force me to have a position, but you want to both get my position and then going forward see if there's a dissonance between how I actually think I should behave and how I do, maybe, right?
Yes, something like that,
Or I'll take it.
but not in any kind
Okay.
of a gotcha way or
Um,
anything. I'm just curious, and then it could just branch off to what we think. Yeah.
um, I think that we would be a more ethical society if we did not um consume animals, because part of the way I value an animal is how sophisticated it is and how much it appreciates its own life. Um, so there's some talk, for example, about how ethical it is to like destroy plants that you don't have to destroy, and that conversation's a little bit of like an ethical masturbation. It's like they don't even have a central nervous system. Um, I can understand how it's in an academic sense it's perfectly appropriate to explore those ideas, but for me in a practical matter I'm concerned with how sophisticated is an animal, what is its level of consciousness, its appreciation of its own existence, its fear of death. Those are things that I take into account. Um, and for human beings there's something even beyond that, you know. But that's not part of the question. The point is, we would be in a more ethical society if we did not eat really sophisticated animals like pigs and cows, at a very minimum. You know, um, I'd still be. I don't really have issues with people who eat meat of a fish that don't even really have brains; they just have a ganglia um, that
Mm,
that controls their nervous system. So so I really think we would be in a better society if these animals with a gregarious, complex life were left alone or allowed to go extinct, because like cows the way they are can't live independently, but you can
Mm-hmm.
have bovine that are wild that aren't really cows.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I would think that would be a good ethical choice. Do I follow it? Absolutely not. You know,
Mm-hmm.
because I've grown up eating meat. I've always I've always lived that lifestyle. Every pork is actually a really important where they process the entire pig by themselves once a year, like a giant 800-pound pig. And pork is in everything. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so I remember I walked into the garage. It looked like an abattoir. It was just like the pieces of the pig were everywhere, and it was just part of processing it. And
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't disgusted or horrified by it. I was kind of fascinated. But I guess I'm rambling now. I'm sorry. My
Oh,
point
you're
is that
fine.
I agree, and yet I don't follow through ethically with my behavior.
Gotcha, gotcha. Yeah, one thing I was thinking about the other day, and it's something that you commented on at the beginning of this video, is um, well, no, maybe you didn't. Well, anyways, the idea of something like religion. So take like Christianity. Somebody can follow this idea, they can follow this religion, and they're not necessarily going to do everything that's in it. So
Mm-hmm.
the religion could claim like not to have premarital sex, but somebody that believes in this God and strongly feels this religion, but their urges lead them to have this premarital sex, they aren't all of a sudden not a Christian. They somebody could, depending on the amount of things they do, somebody could call them a bad Christian or a Christian that's not following all the details. Um, but I was thinking about this other day, and the idea of a philosophy like veganism, and it's I think one of the things holding veganism back is it's this kind of all or nothing. Like if you eat animal products, then you are not a vegan, and then that just means what it means. Where I
Mm-hmm.
think the more and more I think about it, I think veganism should be thought of as a philosophy similar to a religion or just other philosophies, where a person either does or doesn't want to prevent the needless harm of anything
Mm-hmm.
that can suffer, and then if depending on the level of feeling that, you would feel that philosophy, you would be a vegan in the sense that you agree with veganism. That's what your mindset is, and then you might not follow that. You might eat some animals, but you're like conscious of it. And so anyways, I just thought that was kind of interesting. What do you think of that?
I actually really like that. I think that's the kind of conceptual analysis that I think is really useful. It would be
Mhm.
useful to veganism and would hopefully prevent a kind of purity spiral that you're talking about. Um, the other problem with purity spirals is there's a kind of clarity. I remember I said to my sister, maybe older teenagers, I said to her, "I'm going to try like it was wrong to eat meat," and she got really angry with me, and and that was a sort of a formative moment in thinking about why are people so angry at vegans just for existing, and we had to talk about it later, and it was just that she felt like I'd be judging her if I stopped eating meat. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so if you imagine the reason that's relevant to what you just said is that if you imagine everybody has to have an in group, and if you are suddenly rejected by people who eat meat, you have to seek just emotional support and shelter with the people in your life who are all the way on the other side, never eating meat. And that leads to exactly the purity spiral you're talking about, that people are, too gung ho about being vegan instead of recognizing there's a spectrum of willingness to sacrifice for achieving a world where there's less harm done to animals, or whatever, or maybe it's a health concern or whatever brings them to veganism. I'm all saying this like I'm a vegan talking about veganism, but I'm not.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Well,
So
maybe you
yeah,
are though. Maybe you are, and we're gonna find out if you are. But real quick, the every once in a while, the quality of like the sound, it keeps slowing down on like what you say, and then it speeds up real quick. And so I
okay.
don't know if there's an issue with the setting on your phone.
Okay.
Maybe this is the first time I've seen it where the video is a different shape, and I wonder if that's part of it. If it's like if it has to if it's trying to do like a higher resolution thing. Because I think you're
Let's
usually
try.
in that same spot, but yeah.
Let's just for the sake of argument, let's try here maybe. Although I
Gotcha.
do have to say that that it the same thing happened with you. I just
Oh.
yeah, yeah.
Oh, gotcha.
So
Okay.
it could be the system itself, the server or
Oh,
whatever it is.
gotcha. Yeah, and sometimes it sounds like that, and then in the final video it's fine. So I'll just not
Oh,
worry
okay.
about it, and I don't think it's getting in the way too much. I just thought I'd mention it. But yeah, so it really I don't know what it comes down to. I don't know if there's a right or wrong. I guess it's kind of like the Christian thing. Some Christians would say, "Oh, like God hates you if you do this certain thing," where other Christians would say, "Oh, like some of these things don't matter." And so I guess there isn't a right or wrong if to be a philosophical vegan. But let me throw a couple examples towards you. So I talked to this hunter the other day, and I've been talking to a handful of hunters, and I think it's really cool to talk to them. But most of them really care about animal suffering, or at least they claim to, and that's a big part of why they like to hunt because it's an animal out in the wild living its best life, and then it's taken out quick because that person knows they're going to eat meat. Where if they didn't do that, then they would be buying this beef at the store where this cow might have lived a horrible life at a factory farm. And so every amount of meat they consume or share with others from a deer is cutting back on that much suffering. It's essentially doing the same effect that being vegan is, where the less meat you eat, the less in demand it is. Therefore, the less are bred into existence to suffer. And so I thought that was really cool. And one of the hunters I talked to had like a vegan mindset all around and only wanted to hunt and then eat like fruits and veggies and stuff. And then another hunter I talked to said that he cares about the suffering to that level, but he still drinks all the milk, has all the dairy, all the eggs, eats all, buys all the meat from stores. So it's like still I think it's better than nothing to hunt versus not hunt. But like that second person that cares a little bit about the suffering, it like in my mind I wouldn't call that person a vegan. But the other
Mm-hmm.
person that thinks that they need meat to be healthy and is caring in all aspects but still eating meat, I think I want to start calling that person a vegan. In the same sense of how you described your personal philosophy, I think not just because it would do the cause a lot of good, but just for the sake of definition and a philosophy. I think of you as a vegan, and so I don't know exactly how to break that down, but in the same sense that like if we have friends that we feel are like if you have a friend that smoked but then stopped smoking and they start smoking again, you're gonna have a talk with them like, hey, you should probably knock that off. Where
Mm-hmm.
I'm unconvinced that we should declare that nobody should eat animals because we don't have enough information to know for sure. But I think we have enough information to know that we don't need to eat dairy. And I think dairy is very unhealthy for you. And so like if let's say for some reason I was able to convince you to stop eating dairy, if you ate dairy because you had a craving, it wouldn't be that you're not a philosophical vegan anymore. But I might say, like, hey, we talk about philosophy, we talk about ethics. You should probably switch over
Mm-hmm.
to that oat milk, or something like that.
I could get on board because I think it's important to preserve the term vegan for people who have a sense of ownership of it. Um, because I don't want to move in on their sort of space for given that I eat meat and dairy every day. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm comfortable calling myself vegan curious or pseudo vegan or vegan friendly or whatever
Mm-hmm.
term we think might work. In fact, I just bought a new well, I shouldn't talk about that. YouTube probably has a policy, but the point is, I I'm motivated to hunt for the exact reason you brought up, where
Mm,
I'd like to get away from consuming meat that is raised in a way that I think is horrible for these conscious beings that go through a lot of suffering in factory farming.
mm,
Um, but I still, I think I'm moving more toward a position of I don't have to eat meat every day. Um, on Sundays, when my mother-in-law, she's a very good cook, and I don't want to reject her food at all, so I'll come over and enjoy pork with my family. But I will try to minimize my own meat consumption as best I can, and or at least that's not hunted myself.
mm,
So I think I think maybe it is appropriate for someone like me to say that I'm, vegan curious or vegan friendly or pseudo vegan. Um, Pseudo vegan sounds like a name. we shouldn't we shouldn't go with that one. But yeah, like something like that. Because
mm,
imagine, I think it's important to allow a real vegan to preserve their title vegan.
mm,
There are people out there who say they're straight, like a gay guy who doesn't he's never a bottom, never receives. He will say he's straight because he never receives. He's never been a bottom. That's not what I mean when I say I'm straight. And I have a feeling of ownership over the identity of being straight. So
mm,
it's taken like as an insult that this person saying they're straight when I really want it to mean, when I say I'm straight, I want the people who I'm talking to understand that means I don't have sex with men. You know what I mean?
mm.
And I don't
Yeah,
want
yeah,
to. Or more importantly, I don't want
yeah. Mm,
so that's that, and that's what I'm getting at. Is I'm a little bit sensitive to the concerns of vegans who are real vegans who wouldn't want me going around calling myself a vegan. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah. No, I get that. I guess my only concern is that something having a name at the time doesn't mean that it should have. Like maybe that was the wrong thing. Maybe it should have been a philosophical thing from the beginning. But I know what you mean because we use words, so when people hear us, it has a meaning to it, which is usually when I talk to people, I'll say a philosophical vegan. Um, and the first time I had thought of this was a friend of mine that I worked with. How many, like maybe 7 years ago, we'd always talk about various different things. And at one point, he told me that I convinced him that he thinks that the right thing to do is to be vegan, and that he's going to keep eating animals, but that like that ethically speaking, and like how he would describe what's right and wrong if he wrote a book about it, he would come across as a vegan because he thinks that's the right answer, and
Mm-hmm.
just isn't going through with it. And so yeah, I just because it's weird. It's the idea of vegans makes it so nobody else can be ethical in a sense. Like nobody like this whole idea of all or nothing makes it so anybody else that eats animals, there's no conversation to be had on why they might care about the suffering or anything because that conversation's taken up almost. So yeah, I just find it interesting. Like, for example, let's take something like dairy. Um, what would imagine what you might imagine is how the industry is run. And I don't mean this in a way where you're going to have an idea of it and then I'm going to tell you why it's so much worse. I'm just like if it was what you think it is, what information would have to happen for you to go, I'm not going to consume it from the people that are doing this act anymore. I will try to find it when that act is not happening.
Mm-hmm. Well, I should let you know, I come from a dairy family.
Mm,
So, I've seen, calf. It was, I don't know if it was breech born or if that's a thing, but I remember I was in the barn one time and they hooked a calf was being born and they had to pull it out. And it was like, like, wow. And there's the big placenta laying on the floor. And, so eventually the calf was a male and they just sent it off on a truck who I presume that was sent off to be made into like veal parmesan or something, you know.
Hmm.
So um this was it's a farm, a family farm of like 200, maybe 250 head at its most.
Hmm.
So that was my grandfather's farm. So I've seen, the milk house, and I've seen the cows hooked up, and I've fed them, you know, while they were hooked up, and helped let them out during the summer. And they go out in the winter too, I think. It's been so long. I was just a teenager when I stopped doing it. But
Hmm.
yeah, I mean, that's my experience I've had with the dairy industry. I'd imagine that that's a skewed picture for the way that most cattle live, though. I mean, um, in college, I remember there was a representative from the dairy industry who was uh, who was saying that actually she was like, well, actually, it's scientifically proven that cows are more healthy when they are never see the sun, when they're always in these giant buildings. And I was like, yeah, but that's not how we measure like quality of existence, the ability for you to keep an animal alive and never allow it to feel the grass. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? So I remember feeling so horrified, like she was trying to argue in favor of something, and I was like, "Oh my god,
Hmm.
they never let their cows out of the building." You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, yeah,
So
I hate the idea
yeah,
of people just
that's my
trying to
experience with
defend
dairy.
something, like defending something just because you want this thing to be right instead of trying to figure out the answer. It bums me out if more people tried to figure out the answer. It'd be so good. But yeah, no, dairy's kind of interesting. They have I well, I was gonna say I don't know how I feel, but I guess I do know how I feel. The whole idea of the forcefully impregnating by, like, they have to jerk off the bulls, get the sperm, they put their arm through a cow, get the cow pregnant. That way, that because they're gonna want the milk, so they take the baby out. If it's a boy, they send it off for veal. If it's a girl, that it's gonna be probably a dairy cow itself. And then the one of the things that bugs me the most is probably the milking side of it. The hooking up a machine to udders, a machine
Mm.
that can't detect if udders are sore and there's like blood or anything. And I mean, partially that's just kind of gross for the milk itself. But the main thing to me is like knowing this thing that can feel pain is having a machine tug at it without the machine knowing that it's in pain. Um, and then they just keep the cycle going. They just get it pregnant
Mm-hmm.
again and keep going through the cycle until its lifespan is cut so short, and then it dies. And but part of what I'm wondering is like almost taking it to like a wild hypothetical that doesn't even make any sense. Like so let's say we have what I just described, but what if half the milk we received was from farms that knew that to make better tasting milk, you have to beat the shit out of a cow with a bat, and you just had to beat it every day. You keep it alive, but you beat it, and it's just going to go through the suffering. Would you say like, okay, I like the taste of milk, but for the milk tasting better, it's not worth that, so I'm going to buy this one over here. And so
Um,
yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's sort of it reminds me of there was a some country where there's a this idea that the animal tastes better if it suffers. Like that's a real life thing
Mm.
somewhere. Where the animal tastes better if it suffers when you're killing it. So
Well, I think for
or
for kosher, so for Jewish people, and then I think also for halal, I think it's called, which is a Muslim thing, or an Islamic thing. Um, they put the cow in this thing, they turn it upside down, then they slit its throat, and it's like gasping for air through the hole in its neck. But that's to be halal or to be kosher. I believe that's exactly how they have to do it. I don't know if that's what the thing you're thinking of, or if there's a separate thing where the suffering adds to it.
no, I was thinking of a tradition in Asia of of
Mm.
um an animal of fear and suffering when it's dying. Maybe that could be something that wasn't the case. But um yeah, I was curious why the pork that my in-laws have tastes so much better than everyone else's pork. And their theory is both that it's what they feed the pig, the highest quality feed to get a really good like marbling in the fat. But additionally, that the way they slaughter it is that they drain the blood out. So you'd cut the
Mm.
throat of the animal and then let the blood drain out, and that helps preserve the meat from the all of the really destructive adrenaline that's released if you
Mm.
shoot if you shoot the pig through the brain. Like if you simply kill the swine by hitting it through the brain, there's all of the blood is still in the veins and it's flooded with adrenaline,
Mm.
and that's destructive for the meat. I have no idea if that's true. That's just the theory that they were telling. So we have a real life example of that then, where it is a little bit more of a traumatic probably for a pig to, because if you kill an animal by destroying its brain really fast, that almost certainly is going to minimize its suffering versus any other method, I would imagine.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, I would rather eat the pork that tastes not quite as good, knowing that we didn't you know, have to eliminate it that way. And it's the
Mm-hmm.
same way with hunting. Like I want to hunt in part because it's I think a more ethical way to consume meat, and it actually tastes better. When you get, in my opinion, a gamey animal that's been wandering around eating chestnuts or whatever else.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Yeah, a thing I actually learned recently is the hormones that they pump into cows is actually to make them not taste gamey. If they didn't put hormones in them, the cows, I guess, would have that gamey taste. And
Hmm.
yeah, that's just wild to think about, especially with the seemingly proven theories of hormones in meat and dairy like affecting kids starting puberty early and stuff like that.
Hmm.
Yeah, the blood thing's interesting. I don't with the pig, I don't know for sure about that. I have heard from hunters that if you don't kill it instantly and you just wound it, then the stress from it dying leads to it tasting different. And so the killing it quickly, but maybe even better than that as far as taste goes or whatever, would be if you were able to just slit the throat of the deer and then bleed it out. But maybe if it dies instantly and then they bleed it out, I'm not sure exactly how it works with the deer. But yeah, I guess I just think it's interesting because so usually you have vegans and then you have meat eaters, but there's no other talk separate from that. What I want to try to figure out is why there isn't more talk about us demanding better from like the industry. Like with so many people care about like treatment of dogs. If you hear about some football player that like there's a video where you see it like kicking its dog or cat across the room or something, people lose their shit, and they want the laws to reflect this idea of not making animals suffer. And so I feel like somebody could be, whether it's for health or just for taste, be like, I want to eat meat and dairy and eggs, I like all this stuff, but we should definitely hold these people accountable to be doing it right. Do you just think that most people don't have enough time to put focus into like a political push towards that? Because it's just weird, we go to the store and we get this stuff and so many people are aware of factory farms, but like like for you, what is your thought when you go to the store and you see like meat that you're gonna get, and like next to it if there's like a grass fed or free range thing, do you think like, oh, it's too much money to pay that extra to have the cow had been treated better? Or what are your thoughts? Not that I'm claiming free range or grass fed is good enough. It probably comes down to what laws we put in place for how they're able to do it or not. But yeah.
Hmm. I will grab usually the free range one, and
Mm.
that's my wife likes to get the eggs instead, because why are you getting these more expensive eggs?
Mm-hmm.
But I oh, I don't want to lose my main thought when you were saying that. Shoot, it was it was actually, it had to do with, oh yeah, people care about what they're told to care about.
Mm.
Um, if and we this has been one of the complaints from a lot of detractors on the war in Ukraine, and I won't go off on a tangent, but why do we care about Ukraine and not Yemen? And that's a very complex conversation, but it's totally true when it comes to animals and what animals are worth having empathy for and caring about. Um, so when you have the laws we have in place, that you're not, you can face serious punishment if you go in with a camera and secretly film all this stuff. um then
Hmm.
the videos are just not out there, and
Hmm.
if there isn't a push from the top of like, let's cover this news story, um then you're not going to get people caring about it, because we're just animals. We're not meant to be super logical beings. If you put the story in front of us that you want us to care about and make it, appeal to us with these images, powerful images of animals being abused, then people would care more about it. But it's not, there's no there's no money behind the idea of pushing those images. There's money
Hmm.
behind the idea of making sure those images are not out there.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. Yeah. Well, okay, let's backtrack to the dairy thing real quick. So, considering the details of how dairy is done, would you say that even though you like to consume it, that you would you say that maybe it should be, well, I don't know if it should be fully illegal, but something like that, considering the elements of they're not naturally getting pregnant on their own, they, having the emotional distress of taking their kid away. It's actually wildly depressing to hear them like cry out for their kid. But then to be like hooked up to a machine and have the milk pumped, would you say that even if like meat was going to be accepted, as as long as there was protocol for humane deaths or whatever, how would you feel if the government was going to say we milk production's just done, aside from like hand pumped small farms or something?
um I don't know. I think my position now is that, like, we need milk and eggs for so much. um I Yeah, I guess I would not want to rock the boat on that personally.
Mm-hmm.
Um but I would, maybe eventually we could move in that direction. I would want to start just by removing these sort of laws in place that hide the cruelty at a lot of places.
Mm-hmm.
And then eventually we might evolve in a direction that you're talking about, where we return to the idea that there's a local farm, and that farmer has, like, 20 cows, and that's only a part of their life. Maybe they
Mm-hmm.
have 20 cows and they're also a superintendent for their own buildings that they have as a landlord, or the milk's going to end up being a lot more expensive than it is. Milk is like amazingly cheap right now.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I wouldn't want to be callous to those people who really depend on milk, because I
Mm-hmm.
do value people a lot more than I value animals. Um,
Mm-hmm. I do
so,
too.
but I would also be. I'm just open to the idea of definitely reining in the cruelty that exists in the milk industry, yeah, in dairy, yeah.
Gotcha. Is your concern more so on the health side, or like are you thinking that we need dairy for the health, or just the fact that dairy is in so many products? Or are you thinking that just because we're so used to it, people should be able to have it for their taste buds alone?
It's the fact that dairy is a top level item in our food culture.
Mm,
So that it is in so many products. Um, a part of, like, getting around that someday might be people, veganism, gastronomical veganism, evolving in the way that sometimes you hear about. Like, oh, I had vegan cookies and these were better than any non-vegan cookies I've ever had. That
mm-hmm.
certainly wasn't the case when I was a kid, but I've heard about that kind of thing. you know.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be something that really has to come first. And then when you have enough passionate people who are making this great food, then you can make a difference as far as the other end is concerned, you know.
Gotcha. Okay. What about for yourself? Do you drink dairy because you think it's healthy, or do you just like the taste?
I've never not had dairy.
Okay.
Um, so it's almost like, oh, I have to question like what I've always done. This morning I put a little milk in my coffee, you know, and that
Mm-hmm.
makes a big difference to me. Um, so yeah, I talked before about how I haven't been drinking coffee. I decided I should right before our videos start.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I've always had milk. We've always drank a tall glass of milk. Like I said, I come from a dairy family. It's always
Mm-hmm.
assumed that like milk is a primary drink. maybe I'm maybe I'm overestimating the amount to which the whole country cares about dairy because I'm from a dairy family. That's a possibility. You
Mm-hmm.
know, I just can't imagine anybody in my family not having milk.
Gotcha.
Maybe other people feel differently about that.
Gotcha. Yeah, I try to imagine like if we could take let's say just in the production of animal products in the US, if we could somehow calculate the suffering that happens just in the dairy industry, just for the gathering of milk to sell it. And I don't know what that number would look like, but we would like scale it down to like number 1000 is what we have. Like
Mm-hmm.
I wonder because I would rather there be less suffering than more suffering. So I'd rather instead of making like talking five people into cutting out dairy completely, if I could talk thousands of people of just cutting down on it. Like don't drink a glass of milk, but if you need to pour a little in your coffee, pour it in your coffee. Um, it's like vegan cheese might be disgusting, so get regular cheese, but vegan ice cream is pretty advanced. So if you're gonna get ice cream, get that. Well, one of the problems is it doesn't seem like there's much of a health benefit to dairy. So a lot of it might come down to if people are doing it for health or not. But I don't know. I don't know. As a person that doesn't consume dairy, it's hard to imagine. But I wonder if I was a person that consumed dairy, if I'd be able to talk myself into knowing what I consume and cutting it in half, and knowing that like if I caused uh 10 units of suffering to um 1000 cows in a year, then oh cool, now I only cause 10 units of suffering to 500 cows in a year. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know if most people would or could think like this, but I guess that's just kind of what I want to do as a person that talks about veganism. I like the idea of just having less suffering, even if we're going to need some suffering.
Yeah. Just I think harm reduction is a much more productive way of looking at it, and it ties into what you were talking about with accepting people as philosophical vegans, even if they're not totally vegan. Um, so yeah, and that could that goes into ice cream, for example. Like ice cream, I'm sure is one of the most unhealthy ways one one of the most unhealthy food products to that we process milk into. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious because I don't know a lot about it. Um, my impression is that plain yogurt, not sugary yogurt, but plain yogurt is actually really healthy. Is it unhealthy? Be-
Um, I think it depends. I mean, I think there's a healthy element of it, which would be the probiotics because of how the cultures work. And
Mhm,
so I guess it might be something like how most candy would be unhealthy, but if you added some kind of like important nutrients that we never get into a candy, and then you would have the bad
mhm.
element. And so I don't know, it's complicated. There's always different studies showing different things about health, but I feel like even a wild amount of the pro keto people, or carnivore type people or whatever, there's so much to the idea of cutting dairy completely out. And because really the only thing that I'm aware of that dairy is thought of to be good for originally was calcium, but then now we've discovered that not only does most plant food have wild amounts of calcium, like a lot, like especially stuff like broccoli and almonds, lots of calcium, that the calcium that is in dairy actually like kind of pulls calcium out of our bones. So most studies show that the more calcium you consume, the weaker your bones are, where people used to think that it was for making your bones stronger. Um, I don't usually get into the health side of it, so maybe I could send you some studies, or you could look into some yourself. There are plenty of vegan YouTubers that are really good at breaking down the studies. My side's more of an ethical standpoint, but I also, since I agree with you and I care more about humans than I care about other animals, and I definitely care about myself more than I care about other people. I care about myself, I care about my family, and then extended friends and stuff. I care about you more than I care about most people in the world because I haven't met them yet. um, and so if it turned out that somebody was convinced they needed a certain food to be healthy, I would respect that idea of going for that as long as they
Mm,
were being honest with themselves. If they
yeah.
looked at all the information and thought, okay, this is what I need. I need fish. I need 3 eggs a week would be fine. And, whatever different thing it is. Cause like, I just did a video reaction to a Neil deGrasse Tyson thing where he was talking about how vegans won't kill a mouse in their house, but to get that house, they had to chop down trees, and all the families of critters and creatures that were living in the trees are gone. And in the reaction video, I point out, like, I don't care about those critters. Like, I want to make a shelter for myself and my family because I want to survive and I want my people to survive. And to hell with the rest. This is similar to a beaver chopping down a tree to make a dam for its family. I'm gonna chop down a tree and do what I got to do. But once I'm fine, once I'm living in abundance and I can go get food that's already always there at the grocery store and I'm fine, then I can go, okay, now where is the suffering? Am I causing suffering? And then I can start
Mhm.
not causing suffering. But so I'm convinced that I can be perfectly healthy without animal products. And I've been about 8 years without animal products, and I feel perfectly healthy aside from I could probably drop some pounds because I probably eat too many vegan donuts or whatever. But if somebody felt that they needed red meat that was not like ultra processed like burgers or hot dogs or anything, then I go, okay, like at this moment, I don't know what to tell you because the science isn't all on one side. So do what you do. But if they go, okay, and now I need this ice cream, like I'm not going to accept the idea of this is for my mental state, like you know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, when I think of dairy, if I were to go over my head of like what's really important with dairy, most people aren't even eating the actual dairy that I think is good. Like the only dairy I think that is beneficial is literally plain yogurt, not vanilla, plain yogurt, with berries, not with sugar. Like don't
Mm-hmm.
with berries, not sugar. So, and then the only other thing is very hard cheeses, like real Parmigiano Reggiano Romano.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's it. It like all of your soft cheeses are bad for you. The vast majority of dairy does seem to be bad for you. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so I see where you're coming from.
All right, I think that's what you got to do then. That you got to cut your dairy intake down to hard cheeses, your plain yogurt, and let's say even heavy cream or half and half for your coffee. But let's cut the
Yeah,
rest.
that's
Let's cut the rest out.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Can you
I
do
would
it?
even yeah, I'll try. I'll try. I think that's a good idea. I'll have to I even put a little milk or cream in my tea, but I can cut that out.
Hmm.
And I only drink coffee on Saturdays when we have our video. But
Hmm.
I think that what struck me about the objection that Neil deGrasse Tyson was making was this. this argument that it's a reductio ad absurdum, that that's legitimate, and your argument is defeated if they if they say, oh, here's this hypocrisy. You're chopping a tree down and animals live in there. Everything is a balance, and
Mm-hmm.
that reminds me of the same sort of argument we talked about last time about circumcision, and making an argument from tradition is a fallacy. Well, no, I mean, people care about tradition. And just because you can say slavery and human sacrifice were traditions and that those should be defeated, that doesn't mean that it's illegitimate to make an argument from tradition. It means
Mm-hmm.
that it requires balance. There are horrible things that can be traditions, and that doesn't mean that valuing tradition is illegitimate. You see where I'm coming from? Oh,
Mm-hmm.
I thought somebody was coming in, but it's just the wind.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, no, I do see
So,
where you're coming
but
from.
that's a
I, well,
yeah.
I
I
was
was
gonna.
just saying that was.
Oh,
Oh no,
I
you
think
go,
that
you go.
I think there's a slight delay, so it keeps doing a thing. But what I was gonna say is, we kind of have to create traditions because out in nature, before having a society, it's a kind of a free for all. We can kill animals, we kill humans, we do whatever we want, unless somebody gets mad enough that they see us do this and they take us out. But creating a society, it's like the laws that are created are that society's traditions. Um, and I mean, hopefully they're somewhat based in that way where it's not just a couple people deciding some things. We see how the culture is feeling, and hopefully with reason we can convince each other to move towards the right directions. So we can convince each other that these horrible practices in factory farms need to change, even if we're going to keep eating meat. And so yeah, I think it's you're right. I Everything has to go slow. I don't like to let the idea of tradition keep something going, but unless you get it put in law, there's no point to fight the tradition anyways, other than truly trying to convince the person of why a tradition might be wrong. Telling somebody that they're a bad person and then them thinking, okay, the group of people that called me a bad person, they're bad people. That gets you nowhere, you
They're
know?
smug guys. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Oh man. All right. Well, yeah, no, good talk. And we bounced all over the place. I'm curious to hear how your attempt of cutting some dairy out goes. But yeah, we should talk about this topic some more because I keep dabbling with different ideas of how I feel about animals and what we know about them and like differences like we can know they suffer so we don't want them to suffer, but do we know if they have like a will to live outside of instinct? Do they have a want? Are there animals that can picture tomorrow? Can they think like, I can't wait to see my favorite friend tomorrow, like a horse thinking about another horse? You know, and how that affects how we view them. um
Mm.
yeah, and also a lot of people seem to have an idea that intelligence plays a big factor into it, and I think it might, but like to what level? Because we might say that dogs and pigs are two of the more intelligent animals, and so that could be our focus of they get hurt the least. But what if like an alien species comes in that's not human, but they're more intelligent than us? I don't. We might respect them more than non-human animals, but I don't think we'll respect them more than ourselves because we have this natural want to take care of our people to whatever degree we stretch that out to. And I know I just said maybe we can talk about that in our next
Yeah.
talk, but let's talk about that now. Oh, I said I know I
Yeah.
just said
My
that we could.
initial impression.
Oh,
I will have to just.
sorry, I think we
Oh
just
yeah.
keep
I'm
cutting
sorry.
out, but
My
you
my
go for it.
initial impression is that. Oh no, we can end it. We'll talk about that next time. Maybe we can figure out why we keep cutting out, and then we'll leave that
Yeah.
up for next time.
Okay, that sounds good. Yeah, sorry about that.
Like right now, it just failed totally. We'll have to cut this part of the video out.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. All right. Well, sounds good. It was good talking, and I'll talk to you next week.
All right. Thanks a lot.
All right.
Bye.
Take care.